Hello there, and welcome back to yet another Night of the Movies podcast. And in these podcasts, I talk all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm reviewing Five Nights at Freddy's. But just before I do that, I should say what I say at the start of every podcast I do, which is, if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello to my viewers, but if you prefer to just simply listen to your podcast on Spotify, then you're in luck, as you can do that with this podcast on Spotify at Nights of the Movies on that platform. And if you are already listening to me on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, then you can also check this podcast out visually on my YouTube channel at Nights of the Movies on that platform as well. Likewise, wherever you may be watching or listening to this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the podcast, of course, and leave me with some feedback on things to improve on in future podcasts, because there's always things to improve on, and feedback is, as ever, much appreciated. Also, I should say today that I'm feeling a bit under the weather, so I don't know how this podcast is going to go, because I'm very dizzy right now. Honestly, I'm looking at my camera right now as I'm recording this, and I can see about 3 cameras. I'm that dizzy, so I don't know how this podcast is going to turn out. But just a warning off the bat that I'm not feeling too well right now. But I'm gonna push through with this review, no matter what, because I want to be done talking about this. I want to be done talking about this film sooner rather than later. So let's talk about it. Five Nights at Freddy's. So I should say I do not know anything about the video game and the lore that this film is based off. I'm assuming it's based off a video game, because I know there is a video game called Five Nights at Freddy's. I remember one of my mates playing it a good couple of years ago now and saying how much he enjoyed it. I don't know anything about the video game though. So this review is coming from someone who's never played the video game, is not familiar with these characters, with this world in any kind of way, and the only reason I went to go and see this film is because it looked fun, and I liked the idea behind it. The trailers looked okay. They looked decent. They looked like they could be a good time at the cinema, especially around Halloween. You know, it's coming out the weekend before Halloween, which I think is a good release date for horror movies. You know, I've been reviewing some horror movies in the past month or so which haven't released around Halloween. I'm going, why? Cobweb, Haunted Mansion, although Haunted Mansion is not a full-on horror movie, but still kind of a Halloween film, if you will. You know, and there's another one that I forgot off the top of my head right now because it didn't release around Halloween. That's it, Haunting in Venice. Why didn't these films release around Halloween? They would have got far more money, but Five Nights at Freddy's was releasing around Halloween, and I was in the mood to go to the cinema and watch a horror film around this time of the year, and so that's what I did. And as already mentioned, I liked the idea behind this film, behind the concept of Five Nights at Freddy's, because I'm guessing that it took a lot of inspiration. It's loosely based on the whole Chuck E. Cheese phenomenon in America that is now no longer really going on there as far as I'm aware, but used to be this big thing in the 90s and the early 2000s, where they'd have these animatronic animals singing to people in America whilst in these restaurants whilst they ate pizza and pasta and whatnot. And I remember, we never really had that in the UK. I never really had that where I live. I mean, it might be in the UK, but it never really happened where I live. I never really went to a Chuck E. Cheese restaurant. But I'm slightly fascinated by them, because not too long ago, I watched a video from Defunctland on YouTube. And by the way, he's a great YouTuber. If you haven't checked him out, he makes some really interesting videos about abandoned theme parks and these phenomenons that are no longer around anymore. And he sort of resurrects them. And yeah, he made some really great videos in the past. And he made a video about Chuck E. Cheese, at least I think it was him. And he spoke about, in that video, there was a small section, and he spoke about how there was these rumours of kids going missing at a Chuck E. Cheese restaurant. You know, over time, at all these Chuck E. Cheese restaurants, there were rumours that kids were going missing. And that is very similar to the concept behind Five Nights at Freddy's. You have these child ghosts who possess these animatronics. That is the idea behind Five Nights at Freddy's. That is what the animatronics in the trailer are. They are child ghosts possessing these animatronics. It sounds stupid, and it sounds like it really shouldn't work, but also it sounds like it could be fun. It sounds like one of these ideas that could be stupidly fun and really entertaining if done well and if written well. It just could be a really, really good film with this idea, and I like that idea, and as I already mentioned, I like the trailer. Well, I like the trailers for the film as a whole. I didn't just like the one trailer, I saw a couple of trailers for the film, and I liked them all. And the Google plot synopsis of the film goes as follows, and the Google plot synopsis for the film goes as follows. A troubled security guard begins working at Freddy Fazbear's pizzeria. While spending his first night on the job, he realizes the late shift at Freddy's won't be so easy to make it through. And that's the Google plot synopsis for Five Nights at Freddy's. And honestly, this film wasn't really that good. It's not terrible. I've heard some people saying it's terrible and it's unwatchable, and it's not. It's not a terrible film. In fact, I was really liking the first half of the film. There was setup there that I was getting into. There was backstory there with the main character that I was getting into. There was a lot that was happening in the first half of Five Nights at Freddy's, which I was enjoying, and the animatronics done by Jim Henson's the Jim Henson Creature Company. And if you don't know what that is, the Jim Henson Creature Company, they're the people behind the Muppets. They were behind Labyrinth, the film with David Bowie and Jennifer Connelly. They were behind the Neverending Story, the Dark Crystal stuff, and so on and so on and so on. They've done a lot of creature designs in the past, and they are behind the animatronics for Five Nights at Freddy's. And I must say, seeing the animatronics at the cinema and on the big screen were probably the best part of the film. I really liked the way they looked, and again, this is all coming from somebody who has never played the game. So I'm looking at animatronics for the first time and really liking the look of them and the way they move. And I don't really know how they did that. I thought it worked well. I mean, sometimes the animatronics did look CGI. Just the way they looked a bit CGI, but they still worked for the most part in the way they looked. And I thought that, what's his name here, because I've got to get it off the top of my head right now, John Hutcherson, who plays protagonist of the film, I think he did a good job. I think the young girl that the main character's looking after, I think she did a good job in the film. Elizabeth Lyle, she did a good job. Matthew Lillard, he was really good in the as well, because he's chewing up scenery, and whenever Matthew Lillard was on screen, you can clearly tell he's having a lot of fun. I know him best for playing Shaggy in the Scooby-Doo live action films from like the early 2000s, and I must admit I really enjoy those films. I still enjoy all those films now. They're wacky, over the top, don't really work, but are absolutely fascinating, incredible to watch at the same time. They're amazing. They're not amazing films, but I don't really know how they were made, but I really, really enjoy them. And he plays Shaggy in those films. He was also in the first Scream film, and if you don't know already, he turned out to be the killer in the first Wes Craven Scream film, which I'm sure is going to be on many people's TVs around this time of the year. So I liked seeing him in there because he'd been in these kind of horror movies in the past, and I thought the performances worked well. And again, there was a lot to like in the first half of the film. The problem is the second half. Everything just falls apart. It just becomes this. I don't really know how to explain it. It just becomes so weird, and none of it really makes sense. And you're sitting there and you're watching it, and I was just confused and bewildered by it all. I didn't get what it was going for. Like, there's a montage sequence at one stage, and I'm not going to go into details about what's happening in this montage sequence, but there's a montage sequence at one point. I didn't get why the hell that was in there, and for some reason, they use connection, boom, ba-dum, bum, bum, ba-dum. They use that song whilst the montage sequence is happening. I'm just going, what the hell has this got to do with the plot whatsoever? And then all the stuff that's been building up with these animatronics, I'm thinking it's going to get violent. I'm thinking it's going to get gory. And then I remembered that it's only a 12 rating, as far as I'm aware. It's not a 15 or an 18. And things don't really get gory or violent whatsoever. And it becomes really anticlimactic. And I was sat there, going, really? That's what I was building to? That's what I was building to? And this subplot that was going with the main character about, well, I'm not going to say what's about, but the subplot what to do with the main character surrounding him and his family, it was interesting in the first half of the film, but the way it comes together, I'm like, wait, but that isn't really explaining anything. That's not really doing anything. It doesn't come together that well, and the horror isn't there. You know, it's a horror film that isn't scary. That's the biggest problem with the film. It's not scary. There are jump scares in there. But honestly, and I might be alone here, but I don't know. I'd be surprised how many people did find the jump scares scary, because I really didn't. I could see where the jump scares were coming, and they really didn't work for me. I didn't find any of them scary, and sometimes I can enjoy a good jump scare. I remember watching Smile last year, you know, the horror film which is all about the people with their smiles and they just like try and kill each other. That was quite a good film in my opinion. I remember watching that, and there was some good jump scares in that film. But the jump scares here just are so lackluster and are really bad. And it isn't a horror film that gets under your skin. You know, the best horror films, they get under your skin and make you feel unsettled. You know, my favourite horror movie of all time is John Carpenter's The Thing. My second favourite is The Silence of the Lambs. I don't really know what my third favourite would be off the top of my head, but the point I'm making is the best horror films get under your skin, and The Thing gets under your skin. Quite literally, and has some really unsettling moments, to the point that I was looking forward to when that film was going to end because of how unsettled I felt throughout the whole of the runtime of The Thing. And I felt the same with The Silence of the Lambs, to the point that I was moving about on the sofa while I was watching that, and I never felt that way with Five Nights at Freddy's. It's a horror movie aimed at kids. That's what it is. In the writing, in the plotting, in the directing, none of it really screams originality or creativity. In fact, it's a really unimaginative film. It's a really unimaginative film that doesn't have that dark wonder that you want from a film like this. It taps into that. It taps into the whole dark wonder stuff a little bit, but not as much as it should be doing. This film could have been really good and actually quite unsettling and scary if it was a more of a mature audience. But I was sat there and I didn't know what it was going for in its second act. It really lost me. In its second half, should I say, it really lost me with how weird it got, and with the twists, and with the story elements, and the storytelling, and the directing is pretty shoddy in the second half. I actually liked the directing in the first half. There was some good directing in there, which I was like, oh wow, this is actually quite interesting, the way this is being shot. Particularly a flashback sequence that keeps occurring. But then, in the second half of the film, it felt that the director just let things play out. That they didn't really know what they were doing. I don't even know who's directed this film, and to be honest, I don't really care because I don't think they did a good job. It felt like it was from a first-time director. And yeah, the directing felt amateur. It didn't really work. I didn't really care about the characters. And mild spoilers here for people who don't want to know a single thing about this film. And I'm not going to get into any big spoilers. Again, there's only a mild spoiler. But mild spoiler here. There's somebody behind the animatronics and what's going on with all these happenings in the film. There's somebody behind all the horror with what's happening at Five Nights at Freddy's. What's it? Fazbear. Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. There's somebody going on. There's somebody behind what's going on, and I guessed who as soon as that character was introduced, and that character was introduced fairly early on. A little bit of a spoiler there, but the character was introduced fairly early on, and as soon as that character was introduced, I was like, "You're the bad guy." Again, leading into who it might be a bit, but you're bad. That's what I meant to say there. You're a bad person in this film, and I know you're up to something. And funnily enough, I was correct. As soon as the reveal happened in the final act, I was like, "Oh, of course it's him." I mean, I'm sorry, I'm spoiling it here a bit because I'm giving pronouns, you know. But of course it's you. Of course it's you. Of course you were the person behind everything that was going on. This film doesn't really work. But there's a part of it which is enjoyable though. I don't think it's awful. I think there is something to admire in the first half of the film. But the problem with it overall is that it's just not scary. People wanting to be scared by this film will be disappointed. Wanting to be truly scared by this film will be disappointed by it. People who want a good jump scare at a cinema, I think will also be disappointed by it. But if you're going to watch a film at the cinema wanting a fun time, I'm not going to discourage you from watching it because you might get something out of it, especially if you're a fan of the games. I'm not somebody who's never familiar with these games whatsoever. But if you're a fan of the games, then you might like it. You might find something in there which I didn't. And I can see where some people would enjoy this film. I can imagine this, especially maybe next Halloween, this being a film on streaming which people watch and, with a crowd of people and everybody is really enjoying it, but also talking to each other at the same time. This is not a film which requires your complete attention, but I can see this being one of those horror films for crowds next year to come together, to put on at a Halloween party or something like that, if you get what I mean. I can see a group of people watching this at Halloween over the next couple of years and everybody enjoying it because it has... Well, everybody enjoying parts of it because of jump scares and everything like that, but I really don't think it's going to be anything that... I really don't think it's going to stick around too much, though, as a good horror film. I mean, it's really not that good. I don't know how much this review is working because I am so dizzy right now and my head is spinning. So I'm going to round off talking about this film today and just say that it wasn't for me. I really wanted to like it far more than I did. I like the concept. I like parts of the first half of the film. It's not awful overall, and there's definitely moments to enjoy. And if you're interested in watching this film at the cinema, I would definitely recommend you do. But for me, it wasn't scary enough. The jump scares were lacking. The twists were obvious. The reveals of the twist were obvious. Didn't have the payoff that it really should have, and the subplot doesn't come together. I'm not really sure why the subplot is thrown in there. It's uneven. It's not well directed. Tonally, it's a bit all over the place as well. And it just really doesn't work. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Five Nights at Freddy's, I'm going to say that it's an... I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. Yeah, this film didn't really work. But a part of me, I'm happy I saw it at the cinema. I'm not gonna lie, I'm happy I went to come see it. Even though I didn't really like the film, I'm happy I saw it at the cinema though, because I like the way the animatronics looked. That's really lifting the 3 out of 10 for me. If the animatronics were in this film, I probably would have given this film a 1 out of 10. But there is the animatronics in there, and I just liked the way they looked. And I liked the way the human characters interacted with the animatronics in the film. I will say, I think the way they are, the way the animatronics are dealt with in the latter half of the film is really anticlimactic. But there was something in watching animatronics. But this film should have had more dark wonder, though, surrounding that all, and more of this fascination surrounding that. And they do lean into that a little bit, but not enough. Not enough for me to make this... Not enough for it to be an enjoyable experience for me at the cinema. Again, not awful, but it's just not scary. It's just not scary. It doesn't get under your skin. And there are jump scares in there, but they're not anything memorable. People think jump scares make a horror film, and they don't. What makes a horror film is horror that makes you feel unsettled. Jump scares make, elicit an emotion for 30 seconds, and then the emotion is over. Horror, proper horror, elicits an emotion for the runtime of the film. And this film just doesn't do that. It's a horror film aimed at kids. But I don't even think it works in that, really. Yeah, it's pretty unmemorable. And as I've titled this podcast today, Five Nights at Freddy's is an unimaginative, weird ride of flat jump scares with no horror. And that's pretty much how I feel about the film overall. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Five Nights at Freddy's, I'm going to say that it's a 3 out of 10 from me. Anyway, guys, that is it for the podcast for today. Sorry for the lighting in my bedroom right now if you're watching this on YouTube. I'm having to call it quite late in the day, maybe because I've been out for most of the day, and also the people working in my bathroom right now, and they only leave at a certain point in the day, so I can't record before they've left, because you'll just hear loads of noise in the background. So apologies for the lighting in this podcast today, but hopefully if you watch on YouTube you can still see me somewhat well. And apologies if parts of the podcast haven't really made sense. Again, I'm really not feeling well right now. Right after I finish recording, I'm going to go and lie in the bed back there. So I'm going to round things off by saying that if you have seen Five Nights at Freddy's, let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section below. I'd love to hear what people are thinking of the film, especially if you have played the game. And also, if you haven't yet, please click down below and like, subscribe on this podcast. And thank you, as always, for watching or listening to this podcast. And yeah, I suppose that's it. So I will see you guys again soon. But bye for now. Bye.